Hey guys, what's going on? This is Chip here, and I thought I'd share with you some of the new ideation creation work that's been going on. So this week's project, we focused on monitor arrays, and as you can see from this mood board we put together quickly, there are a lot of different ways to look at these kinds of things, and I particularly like this because of the 2D nature of it. You could actually ideate on this using mostly 2D shapes. More on that later. This workshop focused on the concept of iteration, and iteration is really important to designers. What I tried to do was create a problem that was mostly 2D in nature, and that way we could get rid of the sketching barrier, which can be a problem for a lot of the artists because they don't know how to sketch or they don't feel comfortable sketching. So we used a product called sketchtogether.com where I could create a special file online for each person. They would then go on and use some very rudimentary tools to create some interesting designs, and I gave them a quick little video showing them how to do that. And with the goal of iteration, one of the things that we focused on was, let's start off by creating 10 completely unique concepts. And let's do that quickly. Let's say maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes max. And then once we've done that, let's take one of those and then let's do 10 refinements. And the refinements are going to take a little bit longer. They may take an hour to get 10 full refinements done. But once we're done with that, then we can choose a single refinement and we can take that refinement and bring it into Blender and then start modeling. And so what I've done is I've sped up the modeling process quite a bit, but I'll kind of walk you through it a little bit. And you can see that I tried to stay very faithful to the actual refinement sketch. But the simple fact is that sometimes you want to go in and change things because you're working in 3D and it's easy to change things, and you see where something may work better in 3D than it did in 2D, or vice versa. It didn't work very well in 2D and you need to change it up in 3D. So anyway, let's get started, and I'll kind of voice over here, and I'll do a quick voiceover showing the modeling in progress. By the way, I will mention that I did miss a couple parts of the modeling because I forgot to turn on record, so you might see some things skip around a little bit. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are in the beginning of this project, and a lot of this stuff I've already gone through in other tutorials, so I'm not going to get into great amount of detail, but what I'm doing here is I'm just sizing up this 27-inch high cube just to understand what the scale is. And I know I'm going to work at another scale for this because a lot of these models come in and model better at higher scales. So I've set it up to 444, as you can see there. And I know at the end I can just divide everything by, or multiply it by 0.25 and it'll get back. So here I am. I'm going to actually use images as planes, which is the add-on that I'm using to import the choice that I made, the basically refinement choice, and that's the one right there. And so, and I've shown this again before where I'll take a plane, put it in front of this one, and I will use the knife to cut it up. Now you might ask, why don't you just cut up the original? And the reason why I don't cut up the original is because, one, I want it for reference, and two, if I make a mistake and I start to move it a little bit, all the UVs get screwed up and the image moves all over the place. So if I cut the plane in front of it, I won't have that problem, and that's really important. And so this is really straightforward. You use the C key to constrain to 45 and to orthographic drawing, and sometimes you don't. You tap the C key and you don't need to, right? So some things I don't use a 45 for, like that angle right there. And as I do this, one of the things I'm constantly aware of is that if I ever hit the escape key, I'm going to basically get out of here. So without making any changes, and I can't undo that, which is a frustrating thing. And so I'm trying to be really careful to not hit the escape key. I'm also trying to anchor every single vertex like I did just there. That's real important because sometimes when you hit the return key, you're going to get some weird divisions if you don't do that. So here I am. I'm kind of working through this and making sure that I terminate my vertices and create something quick that I can use as a template for generating my I hit the escape key. Now, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And boy, I thought about that twice. This next time I went ahead and go through this. Let me go ahead and speed this up, and we'll get back to it when we're done. Okay, here we are, and I'm basically speeding this up to, I don't want 15x or whatever to show you what I did. Now, one of the things I did do here is I only focus on the top part at first. And frankly, it's because I didn't want to accidentally hit the escape key again and have to do all this over again. So once I've done that, I hit the return key, and now I basically want to go in and I'm going to want to delete. First, I should say I want to straighten up anything that didn't get straight. A lot of times you just hit the J key, the enter key, and you realize that there's some points in there that aren't quite straightened up, and you want to make sure you line everything up. And this is pretty easy to do. Just, using snapping, vertex snapping, you just move vertices so that they're aligned, or you can scale them in the X direction or the Y direction. That will work as well. Or the X direction or the Z direction. And then I basically select polygons, and I Shift X them basically to join them. So I join all the polygons together that I know that I want to be solid faces, and then I select. I'm going to select the ones that I don't want and just delete faces. And that just takes a little while, but that's an important step, because what it does is it leaves the rest of the actual faces that we can now use to generate our model with. And here I am tweaking just a little bit of the other things that need to happen. And as you can see, we're in pretty good shape. Again, I have that template in the background, so I can go back in at any time and look at it just to verify that I'm in the same, I'm in the right, using the right details and matching the right geometry, the original geometry. Now, sometimes I don't necessarily need to do that, but I wanted to do that for this one. And here I'm extruding it, and I really needed to extrude it in the solid mode. I want to make sure that I'm getting it the right direction, and I don't want a lot. This is a very thin type of a monitor, and here I am going to extrude or create a little bit of a gap, and then inset that gap, and now I have the actual monitor. And what this does is it gives me a nice little float, or what we call a parting line, around the edge of the monitor. So I basically, again, just extruded it back, inset it, and extruded it out, and then matched the level. So now you can see that looks pretty good. And set up my HDRI. I've got two different HDRIs in my default scene now. One is for sky, because I like the effect it makes in Eevee, and now that I'm using K-cycles, I really like using the sky as a rendering tool, but it won't work with Eevee. The sky works only with cycles. So that's important. Now what I'm doing is, as you can imagine, I'm just going into the mesh and just adjusting little parts that I know for a fact that I want to just like put some radiuses on some things, some bevels on other things, maybe mark some edges sharp, so that later on, if I do things to them, nothing's going to happen. These little top areas, I'm actually creating more geometry in there, and I'll work with them a little bit to make sure that I get them kind of correct the way I want. You can see that when I pull this back, I have a little bit of a problem there, and I'm trying to figure out how can I pull that back and not get that problem. So I go to this one and immediately recognize that, I just need to do a manifold extrude. So I'll go back to this one, undo what I did, click on it, and then manifold extrude back, and then just grab that edge and then merge the vertices, and I get exactly the effect that I was looking for. So that's important. I also want to look and see if I had any interior faces, and I didn't. So that worked out just great. That manifold extrude that they took from SketchUp is pretty sweet, I gotta say. I really like that. So once I've got that done, I set up the other little sensor area on the right the way I wanted it. And now I'm looking at it and trying to evaluate what's the next step here. What other kind of details do I want to be adding at this level? And at some point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start using kit ops to start cutting. I use the Design Magic K-Packs to help create this a little bit later. So now here I am basically doing the exact same thing. I'm just starting in the same object, and this time I just grabbed a vertice, and I'm just stretching vertices, and I'm extruding them to get faces. So I'm not using the knife tool, I'm just using vertices to create this, which is another way of doing it. Of course, right there I did use the knife tool, but to create some basic block geometry, I use use this vertices method. Now when you see that red color, that means that those faces are flipped, and I just need to select all the faces and do a Shift N, which is I did right there, which basically just makes sure and creates all the normals on the right, facing the right direction, which is in this case the outside. Now I'll add a couple loop cuts because I'm going to be adding some more geometry in here, which is part of the stand. And as I do that, you may notice that I offset the stand from the drawing because I just thought that the actual weight wasn't correct. The center is just a little too far to the right on that. So I've just offset a little bit to get it a little more straightforward. Now I'm adding these little kind of, I don't know what you want to call them, braces, arms. I'm playing with those, playing with the dimensions, trying to make sure that I come up with something that I'm going to like and it's going to accurately reflect what we do. In this case, I just basically selected one and then dragged it on the other side and flipped it and moved it around. Sometimes I'll do that. I learned that from Ian, where you just select a face, Shift D, duplicate the face, and just work with it outside. Even though we're in the same object, we're not in the same connected mesh, and that's always a nice little trick. And I'm doing it, same kind of thing here. This is a completely different mesh than the face, than the stand, and then I, of course, shift in to normalize the faces, and that works out great. And I'm looking at that, trying to get the feet to look right. And I realize that it's just a little too plain at the end. So I'm going to basically extend these out a little bit, something like that, to give it a little more of a base. And later on, I'll come back, and even though you won't see it, I'll go back and I'll slice off the edges of that. If you look at the final rendering, you see the face, those narrow down at the edge quite a bit, because I just wasn't crazy about the way that particularly looked right there. Okay, so now I move that picture to the side, and now I'm just going to go in and start detailing it based on the picture. So I'll just start here using some of the Design Magic stuff, and I'll go in and start detailing it using that first. Let's just use our same extrude manifold technique that we did before to get this to kind of bend over a little bit like that. And it's kind of cool. This does create a warped face there that I found out the hard way. I could have just cut it out from the top, which would have given me a better result, and something that I noted and will remember to do next time, as opposed to try and move this around. Now I'm just using, again, these little Design Magic cutters, and I'm just dropping them in and scaling to what I think is going to work correctly. And now I'm going to add a Design Magic union. So this is just a union device. So basically it's a Boolean that's going to join these two parts. And so I'll drag that in there based on the design. And it has a built-in modifier that will actually put those radiuses on it. All you got to do is just turn it on, which is pretty cool. Again, more detail. Again, using some of the Design Magic tools to add little blivets and indicators and things like that. So, and now we're adding some radiuses to the actual object. Looking at it, see if that's going to work. And it does. Now I'm going to work on the stand a little bit. Again, I use that same technique where I just Shift D, duplicated the face, and now I can just start to work on this any way I want to. And because I don't have a center line, I can't really use mirroring as easily in this situation. It's possible, but it's just a little more difficult. And so it's one of the challenges that I'm going to have as I start to build out that particular stand right there. So here we are, we're going to detail the bottoms area, and this is one of those places where I actually skipped an area where I sketched this out, and it was kind of an interesting solution with how to figure out the center. And basically what I did is I used loop cuts to give me the center, and then used the bevel on the loop cut to actually get the other areas that I was trying to join, and so that worked out good. Now we're using a Design Magic vent, kind of a vent detail. It's not even a vent, it's more of a rib detail, and I can add that in there. And I was going to just duplicate, but I realized, oh, wait a minute, it's not going to come with it, the vent detail, unless I actually go ahead and create basically create a mesh out of that object, and I wasn't ready to do that at this point, so I didn't. And now here I am going to add these are little tiny sensors that are basically tracking the user. So I'm putting these in there, these little sensors, and they'll have little lights that go next to them at the end that'll actually tell you how active they are. and there's all these little sensors I'm putting throughout the actual object, like that one right there. And what they do, they're actually always tracking the user, doing some sort of I don't know whether it's a LiDAR or what it is, but some kind of tracking mechanism that they're using to track the user. In this particular case here, I'm going to come up here and clean some of this up, and I do that by just selecting all these faces and basically sharpening the edges. That works pretty well. Add a little camera area into this. Again, using a Design Magic cutter, it's automatically got this little bevel on the end of the cutter, so that works perfectly for us. And later on, I'll go in and I'll actually build out that little camera. That's kind of part of the teleconferencing system, is that particular camera that tracks you. Looking through some more of the Design Magic details, I'm going to put a lens directly in there, is what I was going to do. As you can see, and again, it has already built-in modifiers, so something like this is pretty easy to do. And here's the problem where I'm having with trying to create my I think this is it, where we create a little cylinder to cut into the hole here, which I wanted to put a cylinder right in here. And as you can see, when we do that, we're going to get a pretty serious shading artifact. And even if I try and slice it to get it away, I can't really do anything about it. And I kept on playing around with it and finally came to the realization that, yeah, that's a warped plane, and that plane won't work as designed. And I would have been better had I actually subtracted from the top, just used a boolean from the top to cut that surface. But it's okay. I mean, I ended up at the end of the day just using a decal there instead of an actual piece of geometry, which sometimes, that's how you work things out. But here I am really really working, trying to figure out how to get that right, and it just got to the point where I just delete it and move on to the next thing. So, and now I think we're getting close. I'm looking at moving a lot of stuff to templates, and take a look at putting this on the ground. I need to basically set everything and make sure that everything has been connected to it as parented to the main object. So if I move one thing, it moves everything. If I scale one thing, it scales everything. So once I've done that, I can now move it to the ground. After I finally add a few more things, this again, I thought, okay, maybe there's a way to do this that I put it over in the side here, and then again, had the same kind of problem. Although I might be able to live with that particular problem, but in the end, I decided not to. So there we have it. Way too much time spent on that one little detail, and I guess we all know about these kinds of things that sometimes that does it. So you can see there my last ditch effort, and just that's when I realized that, okay, I've got a non-coplanar surface there, or non-planar surface there, and so that means that there's no way I'm going to solve this problem. So now I'm actually going to look at doing some lighting here. I think, let me see where I'm at. Put it on the ground first, and let's assign a few materials maybe once we get that ready to go. This is that sun lighting I was telling you about, and because I'm coming from an older version or a newer version of Blender to an older version of Blender, I've got to change the Nishida textures. I've posted a bug in Blender, but they seem to have ignored it, so whatever. I'll just keep on playing around. But I do like the lighting effects that the Nishida sky gives you when you're creating in cycles. I mean, it definitely gives you a unique kind of a color, and it's worth playing around. I'm going to do a video on that at some point, but I'm not sure what. Here I am deciding to go ahead and change differently the actual way I was going to do this, and I think I lost the original one. I'm not sure what happened to it, but anyway, this is a bit different way of creating this surface. I put a cylinder from Design Magic in, and then I just basically bevel it, and then while the bevels are selected, I stretch it so that it's not quite as spherical as one might think. And then I go into some of the existing K mats. These are mats that are materials that are used for K cycles. I've used them for K cycles because they have some things like bevels built into them, which I kind of like. I like the idea of having some bevels. One of the advantages of using cycles is you get a free bevel at the end of the day if you want it on your material, which is pretty darn cool. So the rest of this is really me just playing around with the lighting. And I'll be honest with you, I took probably at least as much time lighting this as I did in modeling it. And then lighting it, adding decals, positioning it, setting up the scene. It was at least as much time as, maybe even more. I mean, it took forever, and I'm not going to go through all that. At this point, I think I was just going to, these are some synth graphics that I created. I'll go in there and I'll UV map them, basically project them, and I just take one side and I'll just grab it and just stretch it so that it fits a particular area. So you can see on the left, that's what I'm doing right there. I'm taking this map that I've created. I think I've got a couple hundred of these maps, believe it or not. Synth generated a ton of these things. And then take that and then just, position it. Here I am doing the other side. So it's a real simple, easy way to add computer graphics to your screen. You can also divide it up and do more advanced kinds of things if you don't want to have the same, charts and everything next to each other. And that's really it. So I just want to say thanks for watching. If you want more detail, there are a lot of videos out there where I go through a lot more detail on how to use KitOps and especially how to use the knife to cut things out. So anyway, I hope that this was helpful to you, and have a nice day, and we'll see you online. Bye.